You found your way to Whispers of Crimes, a quiet corner where the shadows of the past are gently told. Here, we speak of real crimes and mysteries, not to shock or scare, but to wonder, to reflect, and maybe to help you fall asleep. So close your eyes, let your thoughts slow down, and come with me into tonight's case. She was a trusted caregiver by day, a ruthless killer by night. For nearly a decade, Juana Barraza terrorized Mexico City, preying on the most vulnerable, elderly women living alone. Dubbed La Matevajedas, her chilling crimes exposed a dark truth about trauma, trust, and betrayal. Discover the haunting story behind Mexico's most notorious female serial killer. Chapter 1: The Broken Childhood of Juana Barraza. Juana Barraza Samperio was born on December 27, 1957, in Apazoyacán, a small town in Hidalgo, Mexico. From the very start, her life was marked by hardship and trauma. Raised in a destitute family, Juana's mother, Justa Samperio, was a severe alcoholic who subjected her daughter to neglect and abuse. Under the ring name La Dama del Silencio, she fought in small arenas. Wrestling offered her a brief sense of control and power, a stark contrast to her vulnerable childhood. At an early age, Juana was reportedly sold by her mother to a man in exchange for alcohol, leading to years of sexual abuse during her childhood. She never received a proper education and lacked stable employment, ultimately turning to odd jobs and social work programs aimed at assisting the elderly. Wearing professional clothing and sometimes carrying official paperwork, she would gain entry to homes with ease. This work would later provide her the perfect cover for her deadly crimes. The violence was brutal but silent. Many victims were found face down or with household items rearranged around them, a grim signature that suggested an urge to dominate and humiliate. This prolonged abuse and neglect caused deep psychological scars that would haunt Juana for the rest of her life. Instead, Barraza's killings were motivated by rage and psychological compulsion. She reportedly expressed a deep-seated hatred for elderly women, who she associated with her own mother's cruelty and neglect. She grew up without the protection or love every child deserves, trapped in a cycle of poverty and violence. The victims' families often complained that authorities were slow to investigate or dismissive of the cases, allowing the killer to continue for years. The killer's ability to blend in with caregivers and social workers complicated identification. Psychologists studying Barraza's case later identified this early trauma as a critical factor in shaping her adult psyche and behavior. Police sketches varied wildly, and many leads went cold. Several innocent people were arrested and released, including transgender women who were targeted because of societal prejudices. 2006. On that day, she entered the home of Ana Maria de los Reyes Alfaro, an 82-year-old widow living in Mexico City's Venustiano Carranza neighborhood. Officers apprehended Juana just outside the victim's home, where she was found with items stolen from the apartment, including government pamphlets used to establish her false identity. As usual, Barraza presented herself as a nurse offering government assistance. In her teens and early adulthood, Juana escaped the rural hardships by entering the world of Lucha Libre, the highly popular Mexican wrestling scene. The victims' deaths were frequently attributed to natural causes or accidents due to the victims' advanced ages. Many cases were closed prematurely without thorough investigation. This projection manifested in the selection of victims who reminded her of the pain and neglect she endured. The ring gave her a sense of power that she lacked in other aspects of her life. Nevertheless, forensic evidence was overwhelming. Fingerprints matched those found at multiple crime scenes, and eyewitness descriptions aligned perfectly with her physical appearance. Diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, she exhibited a lack of empathy, remorse, and impulse control. This duality, the nurturing caregiver and the brutal killer, made her especially dangerous. Experts describe her as having a compartmentalized mind, maintaining normalcy in everyday life while engaging in horrific acts. Prosecutors presented detailed forensic evidence linking her to 16 murders, though she was suspected of many more. Yet, unlike many violent offenders, Barraza was not psychotic. She understood the nature of her crimes and the consequences. When witnesses described a stocky woman fleeing crime scenes, police were reluctant to take these statements seriously, focusing instead on men or even trans women suspects. Critics also highlighted systemic failures, including the initial police disregard for the elderly victims and the delay in recognizing a female serial killer. It also sparked public awareness about the vulnerabilities of elderly populations, many of whom live alone and rely heavily on strangers for help. The sentence was symbolic, ensuring she would never be released. Her story is a chilling case study in how early childhood abuse, combined with societal failures, can culminate in tragedy on a massive scale. The killer was revealed to be a woman contradicting long-held assumptions and someone who had managed to evade detection for years by exploiting social roles meant to protect the elderly. Her defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that her confessions were coerced. Her ability to kill for nearly a decade unchecked revealed weaknesses in policing, elder care, and social trust. However, even this outlet was short-lived and insufficient to compensate for the damage inflicted in her early years. The victims ranged in age, from their 60s to their 90s, and were all strangled or suffocated in their own homes. Juana Barraza earned the chilling nickname La Mate the little old lady killer. Chapter 2. The Emergence of a Killer, the Victims, and Modus Operandi. Between the late 1990s and 2006, Mexico City experienced a terrifying string of murders targeting elderly women living alone. Her approach was coldly methodical. Barraza would pose as a government social worker, health official, or nurse, leveraging the trust that elderly people often place in caregivers. Once inside, she would quickly subdue her victims using strangulation methods, often using telephone cords, scarves, or even medical equipment such as stethoscopes. Unlike many serial killers, sexual assault was absent from the crime scenes. Official records confirm at least 16 murders with solid evidence tying Barraza to the crimes, but experts believe the actual death toll may be as high as 40 or more. Chapter 3. The Investigation, Mistakes, and Missed Opportunities. For nearly a decade, police struggled to link the murders. Law enforcement officials initially dismissed the possibility of a female serial killer, a bias that significantly delayed progress. The absence of sexual assault and the advanced age of the victims also misled investigators, who failed to recognize a pattern early on. A significant turning point came when local media began pressuring police to acknowledge the growing crisis. Yet, internal police divisions and inadequate forensic resources hampered the investigation. This flawed and disjointed investigation allowed Juana Barraza to continue killing unchallenged for years, preying on the most vulnerable members of society. Chapter 4. The Arrest. How Juana Barraza was finally caught. Juana Barraza's reign of terror came to an abrupt end on January 25th. After killing Ana Maria by strangulation with a stethoscope, she attempted to flee. However, a neighbor saw her leaving the residence and promptly called the police. During questioning, Barraza confessed to the murder of Ana Maria but denied involvement in other killings. The arrest sent shockwaves through Mexico City. Chapter 5. Psychological Profile. Understanding La Mate. Psychologists who examined Juana Barraza described a deeply disturbed individual shaped by trauma, neglect, and abuse. Her hatred of elderly women was seen as a form of displaced anger toward her own mother, who had abused and betrayed her. Barraza's wrestling background added another layer to her personality. She was physically strong, accustomed to inflicting pain, and familiar with control and domination. Her ability to manipulate victims by appearing trustworthy and benevolent was key to her success. Chapter 6: The Trial, Justice, and Controversies. The trial of Juana Barraza began in 2008 and lasted several months. It was one of Mexico's most sensational legal cases, attracting nationwide attention. Barraza pleaded not guilty to most charges, admitting only to the murder that led to her arrest. However, the jury found her guilty on all counts presented, and she was sentenced to 759 years in prison, the longest sentence ever handed down to a woman in Mexican history. Despite the verdict, many questions remained. Some believed the investigation overlooked other possible suspects, or that Barraza's true victim count was underreported. Chapter 7: The Aftermath, Lessons and Legacy. Juana Barraza's crimes exposed critical social and institutional issues in Mexico. The case shattered stereotypes about serial killers, proving that women could commit prolonged, methodical violence. In response, authorities implemented reforms in the way elder abuse and suspicious deaths are investigated, although many advocates argue that more work is needed to protect Mexico's aging population. Today, Juana Barraza remains imprisoned, a grim reminder of the consequences of unresolved trauma and social neglect. That's all for tonight's story. Another thread in the web of true crime, quietly unraveling as the night goes on. If you're still with me, thanks for listening. And if sleep has already taken you, may your dreams be peaceful and your mind at ease. I'll be here next time by the fire with another story waiting to be told. Good night, and don't forget to lock your doors.